In the annals of aviation history, few tales are as eerie and mystifying as that of the Ghost Blimp. On a clear morning in 1942, two experienced military men embarked on what was supposed to be a routine anti-submarine patrol over the California coastline. What actually happened over the Pacific Ocean that day became an enigma that has engaged and confounded people over the last 80 years. The L-class blimp has reliably been used by the U.S. Navy throughout World War II for critical reconnaissance missions. Shortly after the United States entered World War II in response to the devastation of Pearl Harbor, the Japanese military targeted key areas on the West Coast. Over the course of a few months, the Japanese sank 6 Allied ships. This was followed by the shellings of Fort Stevens in Oregon and Elwood Oil Field in California. Hysteria rightfully ran rampant on the West Coast and contributed to the false alarm known as the Battle of Los Angeles, which occurred only a day after the Elwood Oil Field bombing. While the military's official story is that a weather balloon was mistaken for a Japanese aircraft, many people still believe that the U.S.'s response that lit up the sky that night was actually due to a Japanese attack. In addition, after reports of Japanese submarines off the Alaskan coast, residents in Juneau were subject to a nightly blackout. This was followed by a required blackout in Seattle. Schools closed and a blackout in Oakland were the result of a rumored Japanese aircraft carrier near the San Francisco Bay. 500 Army troops even occupied Disney Studios in Hollywood to defend against Japanese attacks. Within a few months, the Japanese military actually invaded the Aleutian Islands and bombed Dutch Harbor in Alaska. Everyone along the West Coast was on high alert, and the military conducted frequent patrols. Early in the morning on August 16, 1942, and in the midst of these events, the United States Navy blimp known as L-8 departed from Treasure Island to conduct routine reconnaissance. Lieutenant Ernest Cody and Ensign Charles Adams were the only crew members on board that morning. Lieutenant Cody, who was 27 years old, was experienced with flying L-8. Ensign Adams was 35 years old and had more than 15 years of service under his belt. He was also an experienced airship pilot, but this was his first flight as a commissioned pilot. Both men had excellent service records and were married. Interestingly, a machinist named James Riley Hill was also scheduled to be on board. However, just before departure, Lieutenant Cody ordered him off the airship. It's believed, but not confirmed, that this was due to a concern over the airship's weight. The airship used in the mission is an L-class blimp that had been produced by Goodyear Aircraft Company and taken over by the U.S. Navy. Due to the small size of the 5 L-class blimps in the Navy's fleet, these airships were used specifically for anti-submarine patrols. Their ability to hover for long periods of time, to fly low, to move slowly and function in fog and other low-visibility conditions made them perfect for this use. L-8 was used almost exclusively for this purpose and for training missions during the war. However, it had a special mission in April 1942, 4 months before its doomed mission. It transported B-25 modification parts to the USS Hornet shortly before its involvement in an assault on Tokyo. Lieutenant Cody captained this flight. Unfortunately, this key role in World War II history is not what L-8 is best known for. L-8 departed at 6:03 a.m. as scheduled on August 16, 1942. Visibility was between 3 to 5 miles, and the light winds were recorded at 4 knots. The ceiling was between 800 and 1,000 feet. The airship's assignment was to patrol over the Farallon Islands, Point Reyes, and Montara to spot enemy submarine activity. Its path would then conclude near the Golden Gate Bridge. This was the 1,092nd trip for L-8, and all previous trips were completed without incident. In addition, the airship had recently passed an inspection only 4 days earlier. Notably, L-8 was armed with a .30 caliber machine gun and 2 depth charges. It was also equipped with a rubber life raft and 3 parachutes. The crew radio headquarters at 7:38 a.m. to report an oil slick located 4 miles from the Farallon Islands. An oil slick is an indication of a possible submarine below the water. 2 ships in the area observed L-8 circling the area roughly 30 feet above the water. This was the last time the crew members were seen alive. Observers stated that 2 smoke flares were dropped over the oil slick before the airship rose. A Liberty ship nearby, the Albert Gallatin, saw the flares and issued a general alarm. The ship's guns were quickly manned. A fishing boat nearby pulled up its nets and quickly sped away. Observers at this time said that the airship was close enough to them that they could clearly see a man with dark hair and a second man in the gondola. Many people on these boats reported seeing the blimp during the official investigation. At 8:50 a.m., the Treasure Island control station lost contact with L8. Only 10 minutes later, L8 veered east while dumping ballast and ascending to a higher altitude. This directional change took it away from Point Reyes to the northwest. Ground control was concerned that the airship had not made a follow-up report about the oil slick. Concern grew when the airship failed to provide its location at the scheduled time. However, this concern was written off due to potential radio failure. Given the clear skies and minimal wind, concern about the airship being in distress was minimal. Nonetheless, the military dispatched 2 search planes, and other planes in the area were instructed to look for the airship. The planes reported seeing L8 between 10:49 and 11:15 a.m. The report stated its position to be around 2,000 feet. All sightings indicated that the airship appeared to be under control. However, around this same time, a driver took a picture of the airship from the ground. In the picture, the man said the airship was bent in the middle. The picture, however, was confiscated and never published. Reportedly, a nearby military base stated that the blimp had landed at that base and that the 2 crew members had disembarked. This claim was later disproved. Nonetheless, that claim dispelled concern about the men's whereabouts and safety for the time being. Around the same time, someone in Ocean Beach apparently saw the airship. Ocean Beach is a mile from the military base where the report of a landing was made. L8 was moving in the direction of the wind and its engines were off. The airship was 50 feet in the air at that time, and it was sagging in the middle. Other ground observers in Ocean Beach watched L8 travel at a low altitude and eventually reach ground. These observers in Ocean Beach looked inside the gondola to find it empty, and they tried unsuccessfully to tether it to the ground. The airship took flight again and ran into a nearby cliff. This impact damaged the starboard propeller. It also set off a depth charge. This lightened the airship's load by 300 pounds, which allowed the L8 to once again take flight. Then, an internal valve in the airship opened. This resulted in helium escaping from the balloon. The airship continued to drift inland. The airship's path then took it near the Olympic Club golf course, Mission Street, the Crocker Amazon community, and Daly City. As it made its final descent in Daly City, it damaged homes and telephone poles. The crash site was on Bellevue Avenue, a residential street in Daly City. A seaplane also observed L8 at roughly 2,000 feet. This was about twice as high as it should have been flying. The airship then descended below the clouds and was not observed by the seaplane again. The seaplane could not get close enough to see if anyone was inside the gondola at that time. Witnesses on the ground had conflicting observations. Some people said nobody was on board once the airship started drifting over the land. However, one woman said she looked at the gondola through binoculars and saw 3 men. Some people even said they saw men parachuting from L8. Almost immediately after L8's crash landing, military personnel and police arrived at the scene. They found the gondola's doors open. Observers stated that the landing had been so smooth that anyone on board should have been unharmed. However, the crew members and their life jackets were not on board. The missing life jackets were expected, as the crew members typically wore life jackets in flight. The life raft and 3 parachutes, however, were in the gondola. In addition, the engines and radio were turned on. The radio's battery was dead. There was no evidence of a distress transmission. Through these observations, it may be assumed that the crew members departed the gondola abruptly. This was further supported by the earlier claim from a military base that the crew members had departed the blimp when it landed at the base. However, the men never reported to the base. Furthermore, L8 was reported to be fully intact, so it should not have been abandoned. Naval intelligence quickly concluded that the 2 men observed near the landed airship were actually the fishermen who had looked inside the gondola and found it empty. For the next 2 days, an exhaustive search of the land and sea was conducted, including aerial searches by the military that added to the bewilderment of those in the area. No sign of the men was found. Despite the many findings that civilians presented to the Navy, no clothing or artifacts from the men were ever found. The interior of the gondola was thoroughly inspected. There was no sign of a struggle. Everything was clean and in place. The dry hatch at the bottom of the gondola indicated that it had never struck the water's surface. A formal investigation concluded the obvious. Specifically, L8 had not been shot down. It also had not contacted the ocean or caught fire. The investigation also concluded that the crew members were not under suspicion of misconduct. In 1943, the men were declared legally dead. Numerous theories have been proposed over the years about the ill-fated journey of the Ghost Blimp and the mysterious disappearance of Lieutenant Cody and Ensign Adams. The military's theory is that one of the men opened the gondola's hatch near the oil slick to set off a smoke marker. The man must have slipped and called for help as he was desperately hanging on to the hatch above the water. During the rescue attempt, both men must have fallen off the airship. After the two men fell, the lighter weight allowed L8 to ascend rapidly. The Navy has stated that this theory is a conjecture. This theory has holes, however. Both men were wearing life jackets, and none of the observers from nearby boats saw anyone fall into the water. In addition, the normal reaction to a man falling overboard would have been for the remaining crew member to radio for help. The Navy instructs its troops to not abandon ship unless it's absolutely necessary to do so. Some people have speculated that the Japanese were involved in the men's disappearance. Perhaps the men had deserted the airship and defected to Japan. Others believe that they were captured by the Japanese and ultimately met their fate at the enemy's hands. Because of the statement about seeing 3 men in the gondola, some people believe that a stowaway was on board and murdered the crew members. Speculation even includes a deadly quarrel over a woman and an alien abduction. After the mysterious and likely deadly events of August 16, 1942, L8 is now often referred to as the Goodyear Blimp America or Ghost Blimp. It was fully restored and continued to operate for 4 more decades. When it was retired in 1982, it was donated to the National Aviation Museum in Pensacola. There, it remains for inquiring minds to cast their eyes on what continues to be one of the most significant aviation mysteries.